Welcome to the Wicked Podcast, where we read the business books you don't have the time for. I'm Marcus Kirsch.
And I'm Troy Norcross.
And we are your co-hosts for the Wicked Podcast.
So, Marcus, when I say the three phrases, the newlywed, the overfed, and the nearly dead, what does it make you think of?
Don't know, nearly dead? You know I'm a positive guy.
This is what they typically used to say about people who go on cruises. They're either newlywed, they're overfed, or they're nearly dead.
In
But
your
I think
case,
that
newlywed.
I think that probably was a kind of 1980s, and we've got somebody on the show today who's bringing cruises right up to date and kind of bringing some of their learnings on cruises into the real world. Who's on the show today?
So today we have Paul Rutter with us and his book, You Can't Make This Ship Up. A great look at the cruise industry and all sorts of stories that happen on board, as much as really good advice on how to run big ships like that with thousands of passengers that you have to be close to every day and hundreds of staff taking care of everyone. So it was a really great conversation and some funny things. And in the book, it has everything from hilarity to even a murder in it. So it was a great conversation. But what were your takeaways?
Yeah, well, I was really curious to figure out how do you find a way to get all of these people that are working together to get very, very much aligned. And it's part hiring, making sure you're doing a good hiring environment, paying attention to the employees, finding the right vision and the mission. And he paid a really careful point around structure, providing the structure so everyone knows what they need to do and when they need to do it, and keeping that balanced with the employees. And that was a really, really good point. The other one was prior planning prevents poor performance. It's a trite old saying, but it absolutely is true. Get the planning right and prevent the poor performance. But what were your takeaways?
Yeah, so I think mine was, even so there is this structure which brings clarity, which is a really, really great characteristic, as you said, to create clarity in your work environment. The other one was also to bring in this flexibility, right? If you have clarity on top, a clarity context, and then give your teams the flexibility to do anything they need to do in order to get there, that's great. So, nearly, even though we really didn't quite talk about self-managed teams, but talking about teams that are enabled enough to do whatever it takes, along with the guidelines, but within that, have enough wiggle room and space to act in order to do the best performance they can and be flexible within what they can. And I think given that it's such a contained space and there's a lot of strict rules about health and safety and whatnot, it's amazing some of the things he talked about, like what flexibility you actually need and what flexibility you give that. And you do that across, as he described, a staff that sometimes is made out of 7 people from 70 different countries. So you got all that flexibility, and in addition to that, all these different viewpoints from different cultures, all in one room, all in one space, trying to get this done. So it's quite amazing that how they can actually avoid and want to avoid micromanagement, because they know that's not helping, it's not working, and they know it. So I found that level of management and team management and flexibility really, really great to listen to. Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right, because having that flexibility is very, very important. Why don't we be flexible at the moment? And let's go talk to Paul.
Before the interview, a quick word from our very first sponsor, Zencaster. We use Zencaster for all our audio and video recording, and it's a very nifty tool that splits up all the channels for very easy editing. Zencaster is used by 10% of all active podcasts. You can get 40% off the first 3 months and unlimited audio and video recordings with our special coupon code wickedpodcast. I repeat, wickedpodcast for 40% off. And now the interview. Hello, everyone. Today we have Paul Rutter with us. Hello, Paul, and thanks for being on the show.
Nice to be with you, Marcus. Thank you.
And as usual, we start at the top, so please tell our audience who you are and why you wrote the book.
Okay. Well, my name is Paul Rutter. I'm coming to you from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I have been involved in the hospitality and the travel, and more specifically, the cruise industry for over 40 years. I work on board some of the largest and most luxurious cruise ships in the world as a cruise director, which means I'm in charge of activities and entertainment. So I'm the person out front. I'm the fun guy, the one that you see on stage every night and hosting all the main activities and introducing the captain. And so every time I tell people that I work on board a cruise ship, people say, "Oh, you must have great stories to tell." And the fact of the matter is yes, I have some wonderful stories to tell from working on board cruise ships, from where we actually live with our customers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is a very interesting dynamic. And so we talk about things like that. We talk about living with your coworkers, how an interesting dynamic that is with employee engagement. We have employees on board our cruise ships from over 70 different countries. So that's a very interesting dynamic. And so about 10 years ago, I started collecting all these stories, writing them in down. And unfortunately, with the pandemic and what it did to the cruise industry, which has pretty much wiped it out for a couple of years, it is now starting to come back. We're very happy about that. But I started writing down these stories and writing the book and how it can relate to land based businesses. There are a number of books out there that talk about the salacious things on board cruise ships, what happens below deck, and all the gossipy things. But I wanted to write something that was more business based, where land based businesses could learn from what we do on board the ships, where we actually live with our customers. As I mentioned, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And what if land based businesses had to live with their customers? How would they treat them differently? Would they return phone calls a little bit quicker or answer emails a little bit quicker? And so when we get into those types of discussions, it really is very unique to learn how land-based businesses, what they might do if they actually lived with their customers and lived with their coworkers. So my first question I always ask is, could you or your company survive if you had to live with your customers, clients, and coworkers? And so uh, that's how it started. It's been an incredible journey. I've been paid to travel not all over the world, but a good portion of the world. There's still a few things on my bucket list, and it was just some interesting things to write about, and so it's been very well received so far. So I'm very fortunate about that. Very grateful.
Yeah, and it shows. I mean, it's full of very, very interesting and entertaining and sometimes slightly sad stories, as much as it is a very interesting industry and a very particular context that I think doesn't exist for a lot of companies. So it's a great thing to look at for inspiration and trying to take some good lessons from that. And so the first question goes regarding that. So there's a lot of conversation now about customer centricity and being there for your customers and being everything around the customer. Yet, and you might agree to that notion. Yet one of the first things you're saying in the book is, your employees are more important than even your customers. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Well, there's the age-old question. There's two age-old questions. The first one is the customer always right? And the second question is, who's more important, the customer or the employee? And we have found out in our industry that the employee comes first, because if you take care of the employee and they look forward to coming to work and they get up with a great attitude of willing to help and be part of the solution as opposed to being part of the problem, if the employee knows that you're looking out for their best interests, then they will take care of your customers. And that has been proven over and over again. So in our world, the employee comes first, and dealing with employees from at least 70 different countries on all of our ships really lends itself to a whole unique dynamic. And how do you keep them all engaged? How do you empower your employees? What are some of the things you do to make them feel welcome? Some of these people are leaving home for the first time. They've never been away. People from the UK or from the States or from Canada, we're the minority on board, which is very unique for us. Most of our crew members might come from India or the Philippines or Pakistan or China or some of the Eastern European countries. So, how do we all get together? How do we have a great time and look forward to coming to work? So, to answer your question, I know it's a long, long answer, but in our business, if you take care of your employees will take care of your customers.
It's a really great answer, and I think it's very important. I talk a lot about multiple stakeholder capitalism because a lot of today is all about shareholder capitalism almost exclusively. And there are other stakeholders like employees, like customers, like society at large, and like the environment. When you talk about having employees being one of your most important assets and getting that right makes it easier to deliver great customer service, it makes sense. And when you talk about multiculturalism, that's another big challenge. But I've been on a cruise. So I went on my honeymoon cruise on a celebrity cruise line, and there were so many people that were saying, we're here, but we're here for 6 months and we never get off the ship. It's like they're constantly doing work. They never get a day off. How do you hire people with the right attitude for that intensity and sustainability and multiculturalism?
So let me address the first part of them saying they're never allowed off the ship. That is, well, let's talk about before the pandemic, because the pandemic has given us a whole new set of problems. But before the pandemic, I worked mainly with Royal Caribbean. So Royal Caribbean owns Celebrity. So we are under very strict marching orders that there are only a certain number of hours we can work, and there are a certain number of rest hours that we must get. And there is sort of a seamen's labor union. It's called the International Maritime Labor Organization. And all of the working hours have to be registered on computer. And you have to have at least, let me make sure I get this right. It's been a while since I've been on. You have to have at least 10 hours of rest every single day, and one block of time has to be at least 6 hours. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be sleeping all that time, but we are restricted to how many hours we can work on board every single day. And so if we go over, we get penalized. So we as managers have to schedule our people in a way so that we know they're not going over those maximum number of hours every day. Now, I will say that, yes, some people do work every day, but they always have time off during that day. So every single crew member is allowed off in a port of call. It might be an hour or two, or it might be they have the afternoon off, depending on where you work on board. Obviously, waiters in the dining room have breakfast, lunch, and dinner to serve. Stateroom attendants have to be cleaning their cabins. But once they're done with their shift, they absolutely have go ashore. They can go to the beach. They can do sightseeing. We sometimes have tours just for the crew that our crew office arranges to go to some of the historical sites, because we're going all over the world. And of course, part of the appeal of this job working on a ship is being able to go and see the sites. I mean, before the pandemic, I was in Asia. I was able to climb the Great Wall of China. I was able to go to some incredible landmarks there. So in Egypt, of course, I went to the pyramids. So you don't go to these countries and don't get to go sightseeing. So yes, hours are long and they work hard. To answer your question, how do we hire these people? These people, when they go home, the money that they make on board, they're kings and queens when they go back home. They support their family. They build houses for their in-laws. They send their kids to college. So their rate of pay might not look good to somebody like an American, where their cost of living is very high. But a lot of these crew members are so happy to come back to work that they are very excited, because the money that they make on board is everything that their family needs back home, as well as their in-laws, their parents. They really can take care of their families on the salaries that they make on board.
And what about mentally and kind of emotionally finding that kind of a fit? Yes, so the monetary reward absolutely makes a huge difference when they go home. I get that. But finding the right kind of culture fit or psychological fit, how do you address those challenges?
Well, like in any job anywhere in the world, yes, it can be difficult, and certainly with the times we're going through now, it's even more difficult. You mentioned about trying to keep people. I mean, I don't know how it is over in Europe, but here in the States we have what's called the Great Resignation, where a lot of people during the pandemic have quit their job because they were just so fed up with either bad working conditions or low wages or lack of respect, or just not liking where they're working. So we did a survey after the first 6 months of the pandemic of how many crew members want to come back. And overwhelmingly, they were so ready to come back on board because of the way they're treated. We have an HR department on board every ship. We do lots of activities on board. If there's crew members from Jamaica and it's Jamaican Independence Day, then we'll have a big party for the crew to celebrate their independence. The same thing for 4th of July or for Indian Independence Day or for whatever major national holidays. We know that people are very proud of where they come from. And so we try to make them fit in as easy and as seamlessly as possible. Excuse me. We understand being away from home can be a very emotional experience, especially if you're, 21, 22, 25 years old, first time away from home, and you have the weight of your shoulders on you. So we do a really good job knowing that it's a very different lifestyle and that it's important that the culture on board is very welcoming. So, for instance, we know on board that if your cabin is good and the food is good, then that's going to put you in a good frame of mind, because you don't want to go back to your cabin if you know the shower is leaking or the toilet doesn't flush or things like that. So we make sure that their living conditions are really good. If they're small, but they're good. They share two people to a room. They have a bathroom, a refrigerator, a TV, internet. And so we know if their accommodations are good and the food is good. So as an example, we, as Americans, we might have for breakfast bacon and eggs or cereal or oatmeal. Excuse me, getting a frog in my throat. We may have that for breakfast, but some people from the Philippines or from India, they may have rice and fish and meat for breakfast. They want to feel like a little bit of home is on board. And so we prepare everything so that all different nationalities feel welcome when they go into the staff mess. They'll find something from their own part of the world that they're used to eating back home. We might not eat chicken feet here, but chicken feet is a delicacy in some parts of the world. So when we put chicken feet out in the staff or the crew mess, we go by and we say, no, thank you. But they go quickly to the people who happen to love chicken feet. And so that's what we can do, is we can make the ship feel like a little bit part of home and very welcoming, and know that if their food is good and their accommodations are good, then they're going to work hard for us.
Lovely, lovely. I want to dig a little bit more into that. Apart from finding the right people, one of the impressive numbers you have there as well, I think it's particular Royal Caribbean or so, where within just a few months, hundreds of people are often getting hired and moved around and so on. And sometimes you say it's not unusual that someone within a week starts a new job somewhere else. How is that established? Is there a difference between people who start new in the industry and people who have been for a while in terms of the time you can turn around? Because other organizations, on average, if you want to have someone on a project basis, even, it takes at least a month or two or something to get someone really in there, signed off, everything's background checked and whatnot. It takes a while. How does it work in your industry?
So the first time you join a ship, you have to have certain visas. You have to have medicals done. Every 2 years, we have to have a full physical. And so the first time you're joining a ship, you have to be running around and getting all of the necessary paperwork. It could be that somebody's about to join a ship, but they didn't pass their physical. And so all of a sudden, with less than a week to go, this person can't join. We have to go and find another person right away. Maybe somebody who's already passed their physical or who has the right paperwork and can join in a moment's notice. So when you are a new hire, there's a whole list of things that you have to do. So it might take a little bit longer to get you on board. But if you've already been on board for a contract and you already know what's expected of you, you already have your paperwork totally up to date, your medical, which is good for 2 years, is up and running. So those then it's quickly it sometimes is quick to get somebody on board. In the old days, maybe 30 years ago, they weren't requiring medicals, and it was much easier to get on board. Okay, we need you next week, fly to Fort Lauderdale, we'll take care of the paperwork, and that was it. But now it's much many more regulations. Certainly governments, every time you go in and out of a port, they check all the paperwork. They check to make sure your passports are in order, that the visas are there. And so there's a lot more physical paperwork and regulations now that regulate the industry, certainly for new hires coming on board. So, but yes, back in the 90s, we came out with 6 new ships in 3 years. We had to keep hiring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of new crew members. And so we have hiring partners all over the world that do the initial hiring and interview. And if they can pass that first interview, then they're passed along to our HR department at Royal Caribbean in Miami. But everybody, if anybody's looking for work, there's a hiring partner in specific countries, and that's where they apply first, and that takes time as well. Sometimes somebody may apply for a waiter position, but we don't have any waiter positions, but there may be a cleaning position available. So people just want to get on board, so they may accept a cleaner position, hoping that they will be able to move into something like a waiter or an entertainer or a crew staff member or something like that. So it can be anywhere from a week to a year to get on board, depending on if you have the right paperwork and if those positions are available.
Mhm. And the other thing you mentioned as well is that the willingness to learn, therefore, is quite a valuable skill. And so, how do you compare that to anything else someone might bring along? Is it really paramount? Is it really that? Because we see that a lot happening now in a lot of other industries, and other industries have a history of always hiring for just one specialization, and that doesn't seem to work out anymore. So there's a trend of that, but it sounds like that has been sort of a bit more of a standard in your industry, just people being able to move around a bit more and be more flexible. What's your view on that particular skill set?
Well, I think it's very important that people to be in a position that they really want to be in, but they will sometimes accept a position just to get their foot in the door. We're very big on being able to move people around, but we just don't do it willy-nilly. We just don't do it automatically because somebody says, "Oh, I want to be a waiter," or they're a cleaner but they want to be a waiter, or they're a cleaner and they want to be a crew staff member, or they want to sing on stage. They may have talents that we don't know about. And so we encourage things like that. Some of the best people that I've worked with in my division, which is called the cruise division, where the singers and dancers and crew staff and youth staff and all the musicians and all the technical people, they work in the cruise division where I'm the division head. But some of the best people have been from other divisions. So there may be somebody who's washing dishes in the galley, but technically he's really smart and can fix things and is very good with his hands. And it may be somebody who's perfect to be a backstage, what we call stage staff, because he's really good with his hands and technically he can repair things. And it might be something that he's really interested in that we never knew about. And so there's an interview process and there's a process on board that if you want to change departments, you can. You do have to complete one full contract in the position that you were originally hired for. But after that, you can then start looking at other positions. So for instance, when I first joined, I was working in the casino. I was just a cashier in the casino. But I could look around and see all the different jobs, and I would see the people on stage, and I see the cruise director, and I'm thinking to myself, that might be interesting. That might be something I can do. And so when I came back with the crew staff department. It was a few years later. I was in the casino for a while. But when I came back, I thought, I'd like to try crew staff. So I was hired with Royal Caribbean as a crew staff member and then went up from there up to cruise director. And so we encourage people that if they see certain positions that they may be more suited for, we want people to be happy in the position that they are. We don't want them to look across the aisle and daydream about being in that position and us saying, sorry, nope, you were hired for this position. There's no way that you can change jobs. That is not in anybody's favor. We want people to be happy where they are because they know they'll do a better job for us, again, if they look forward to coming to work every day.
That's really, really good. I want to move slightly to a different direction and connect it back to some of the clients that Marcus and I deal with on a day in and day out basis. We're seeing more and more teal organizations, self-managing teams, self-organizing teams. You're really starting to grow green shoots as opposed to the old command and control sort of leadership. In order for those things to work, you need to have a really strong vision, a really strong mission, and have everybody aligned and pulling in the same direction. And whether it's day in and day out on a cruise, or whether it's changeover day when there's lots of things happening, every single person needs to know exactly what they need to do to make a successful changeover. How do you explain to land based businesses how you bring vision and mission and self organizing teams to really maximum effect?
Well, that's a pretty loaded question. So let me do my best to try and answer it. The great thing for me on a cruise ship is there is very detailed structure on board. I'm a person that likes structure. I thrive well in structure. So it starts at the top with the captain. There's one captain who is responsible for the well being of all the passengers, all the crew, and right now $1 billion ship. So that's tremendous responsibility on one person. He has senior staff under him, the chief engineer and the staff captain and the hotel director. And then it comes down from there. But the structure is there, and that's something that I need in my life that I recognized a long time ago, which is, it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just how I operate best. So I know that at 8 o'clock at night, if there's a show starting and I have to be on stage at 8 o'clock at night, I can't show up at 2 minutes after 8 because I'm already late. I need to be there at 7:45 to make sure that the mics are working and that the production manager has done his job and everybody's in place and the sound and the lights people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so the structure on board is really good for that. But what's great on board is that within our own division, they give us leeway. They don't micromanage us. And that can really hurt a business when people feel they're not given the sort of leeway or the respect to do the jobs that they were hired from, that managers and supervisors feel they have to be looking over people's shoulders. So it's great to have a very strong leader, but part of being a great leader is letting people do their jobs and not micromanaging. And on board, you sort of have the best of both worlds. If we want to try something new within our division, then they give us that leeway. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, not a problem. But if it does work and it can help either save money or make a better experience for our customers or have a better flow, because on the biggest ships in the world, you have over 6,000 people. Flow is very important. You don't want everybody gathering in the same area at the same time. You want to be having things spread out around the ship so that it doesn't feel like there's 6,000 people on board. And so they give us leeway to manage our own departments, but we know that there's still a structure in place. First of all, for health and safety reasons as well, we have to have a very detailed structure on board because every crew member has a safety assignment. So in the case of an emergency, we know exactly, and we practice every single week. There's crew drills every week. So we know exactly what we have to do. So that part is, there's no room for error. Safety, health and safety, there's no room for error. Safety and security. So they give us leeway to try new things within our area, but we know that, you answer to the captain and he has everybody's lives in his hands. And there's a lot of respect for those stripes on his shoulder because we know the amount of pressure that's on him or her. We have female captains as well. It's the best of both worlds. It's structured, but they give us a lot of leeway. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and so I want to ask a little bit more, I think, in that direction. And on top of that, unfortunately, we always have more questions than we have time. So this will probably be the last with a potential follow-up. So tell us a bit more about the leeway and some of the stories and how flexible you can be with your passengers, and if you might want to try to add to it, please, the positive or negative effects of the Titanic movie to those endeavors in particular, please?
Well, I will say the Titanic movie was one of the best things that ever happened for cruising. The bookings tripled after that movie came out. So that and the TV show The Love Boat back in the late 70s, if you remember The Love Boat, you guys probably aren't old enough. But yeah, the Love Boat and the Titanic have been absolutely wonderful for cruising. Cruising's never been stronger, and even now, as we reawaken from the pandemic, bookings have been extremely strong. People want to get away, and the cruise ships have become. I know there's a few minor outbreaks, but the cruise ships right now are one of the safest areas you can go on vacation because everybody's vaccinated. And I know we don't really want to get into more of the pandemic. But the Titanic movie was absolutely wonderful. And people go to the front of the ship and they do, oh, King of the World, as long as they don't fall overboard, that's okay. We're cool with that. But that movie was absolutely wonderful. And the first part of your question, remind me, some of the stories about how being flexible.
Yeah.
So I write about this in the book that we do a lot of group charters on board. So group charters is where one company charters the entire ship. It could be a business, it could be a music promoter, and they bring music groups on board. We've done music cruises, we've done sports charters. But this one particular charter that we had was a clothing optional charter. That means everybody on board was a nudist, that as we got 12 miles out of the limit, they could take their clothes off. And they were all there to take their clothes off. So here I am going out on stage. You know the old saying, I don't know if you know the old saying that if you're nervous speaking in front of a crowd, imagine them naked. But what do you do when you go out there and they are naked, completely naked? What do you imagine them clothed? I don't think that would work. But we had some flexibility there with some of the activities we could do. It was a crazy cruise. It was a lot of fun. I don't know if I ever want to do it again, but it's some of the things like that that really keep the job interesting and give us an opportunity to try different things and do different things. So I've been on scientific cruises where we followed a total eclipse of the sun. That was amazing. I've been on music cruises where we've had groups like Earth, Wind, and Fire and the OJs and Erykah Badu and all just crazy, wonderful musical groups on board. I've sailed with sports figures over here in the States, Super Bowl champions and big sports figures. So that adds to the flexibility of what we can do. And flexibility in terms of weather as well. Weather plays havoc. From June 1st till December 1st, it's hurricane season. We have to deal with hurricanes all the time. And we have to be flexible because, in a few days, a hurricane may be heading right towards the island that we're heading for. And so we never go where hurricanes are. We're scared of hurricanes. The ship could handle a hurricane, but the passengers and the crew would have a very difficult time with the movement of the ship. And so we have to be flexible that way, that I could get a phone call at 5:00 in the morning where the captain says, Paul, I'm sorry, the weather is not good today. We're bypassing the island. Instead of going to Grand Cayman today, you have a full day at sea. Now go put together a whole emergency sea day. And within 2 hours, I have to get all my team up. They love getting those calls at 5 in the morning, trust me. And then we have to plan a whole sea day when we were expecting a port day when everybody was going to be off the ship. And so we have to be flexible that way. And one of the ways we can do that is by being prepared, by being proactive, as opposed to being reactive. And so we have in our midst, before a cruise ever starts, we have an emergency sea day planned just in case. And so that's what land-based businesses can do. They can try and foresee any possibility in the future, plan for it. Obviously, it's impossible to plan for every future, but what happens if your power goes down? How are you going to communicate with your customers if your power goes down? Do you have a plan in place now that you can just go right to, and everybody in your company knows and is aware of what's going to happen if the power goes down? What's going to happen if there's a breach? There's lots of companies where their computer systems are being breached and hacked into. Do you have a plan now of what's going to happen if your company is hacked? Weather conditions. What if it's slippery? What if it snows outside? Do you have somebody who's going to shovel the sidewalks and make sure that your customers don't slip and fall and break their leg on your property, which can cause a lot of problems? So all these things, I always recommend that you have a brainstorming session with your employees, get your employees involved. What are some of the possible things that could go wrong? And how can we prepare and plan for them now ahead of advance? I don't know if you know the old saying, the 5 Ps of proper preparation prevents poor performance. If you're familiar with that, then you should be able to be flexible, and that gives you flexibility if you're prepared in advance for most of the situations that can arise.
Yeah. One of my favorite other sayings is, lack of preparation on your part did not constitute an emergency on my part. On that, I'll hand it over to Marcus to wrap us up.
I'll give you one more. Prepare to fail, fail to prepare. No, prepare to fail to prepare, then prepare to fail. That's
lovely. I think that's a great answer and some really great quotes there, right at the end of this. And I think, I think it's also a great example for organizations just to play different scenarios and consider a little bit more than they usually do. It's definitely a great, amazing exercise, and someone should take note of that more. So in apart from that, unfortunately, we're at the end of our time. So all I can say is thank you, Paul, so much for your stories and your insights and spending some time with us. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And if anybody wants to get in touch, if I can just mention my website, which is paulrutterspeaks.com. The new book is out. You can't make this ship up, and it's available around the world, Amazon and other fine places. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk. And I, as you can tell, I get a little bit passionate about customer service and customer experiences and things like that. So anytime you want to talk, I'm more than open to the wonderful possibilities.
So do we. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Wicked Podcast with co-host Marcus Kirsch and me, Troy Norcross.
Please subscribe on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify. You can find all relevant links in the show notes. Please tell us your thoughts in the comment section and let us know about any books for future episodes.
You can also get in touch with us directly on Twitter on @WickedandBeyond or @Troy_Norcross. Also, learn more about the Wicked Company book and the Wicked Company project at wickedcompany.com.